72% of experienced travelers now believe Americans will be perceived more negatively abroad. That's not a fringe blog take. That's a global rescue survey of mostly US and Canadian respondents fielded in early 2025. And the country-level data is brutal. Pew Research's 2025 G7 Attitude Survey shows Germany with one of the steepest collapses in positive views of the United States. Canada recording the largest favorability drop among G7 nations at roughly 40 percentage points from prior peaks. And German federal travel advisories now explicitly warning citizens about heightened tensions when visiting the US. NATO disputes, trade wars, ICE headlines. The political anti-Americanism is real. But here's what every viral countries where Americans are unwelcome list gets catastrophically wrong. They are ranking headlines, not how you will actually be treated when you sit down at a café in Boquete or a taverna in Crete. Political anger toward US policy and personal hostility toward individual American retirees are two completely different datasets. And confusing them is how you either stay trapped in a $4,800 a month US retirement you cannot afford, or talk yourself out of a move where locals will buy you a coffee and ask how you're coping. The average Social Security check is $1,900. Medicare doesn't cover dental, vision, or long-term care. 44% of US adults have seriously considered retiring abroad, according to a 2025 Harris poll, not because they want adventure, because the math at home doesn't close. We ranked 7 of the most debated expat-friendly destinations by how welcome Americans actually are on the ground in 2026. Separating consulate politics from cafe table reality. Cross-referencing InterNations Expat Insider 2025, Pew, YouGov travel sentiment data, and boots-on-the-ground expat reporting. Counting down 7 to 1. Stay until number 1, because the country at the top isn't where the headlines are quietest. It's where the most common reaction you'll get from locals is sympathy and genuine curiosity about how ordinary Americans are holding up, not anger directed at you personally. This isn't a feel-good travel video. It's a data correction. And the correction matters because fear is keeping millions of Americans from making a move that the numbers already justify. Everything in this video was cross-referenced against Pew Research Center's 2025 to 2026 Global Attitude Surveys, Global Rescue's 2025 Traveler Perception Study, InterNations Expat Insider 2025 with over 10,000 respondents across 172 nationalities, YouGov's December 2025 U.S. International Travel Sentiment Tracking, and active American expat forums in each destination. Our methodology measures 2 distinct scores per country: political anti-American sentiment in national media and government posture versus personal treatment reported by American retirees living there right now. Viral lists conflate them. We don't. We also reviewed consulate advisory postings, BBC and USA Today field reporting from 2025 and 2026, and Rick Steves' on-the-ground European travel assessments. If a country appeared on a don't go list, we checked whether the data measured tourist behavior, government policy, or retiree integration, 3 different questions that produce 3 different answers. Germany tops every political sentiment chart right now, and if you only read headlines, you'd never set foot here. Pew's 2025 data shows German confidence in the US as a reliable partner collapsed, dropping from 74% of Germans viewing the relationship positively in 2024 to a fraction of that by mid-2025. German media coverage of US policy has turned sharply critical, and Deutschland's Federal Foreign Office issued updated travel guidance for citizens visiting America amid rising bilateral tensions. That's the political score, brutal. Number 7 on political anti-Americanism, deserved. But here's the surprise most Americans miss. Political hostility toward US government policy does not translate into personal hostility toward you at the bakery counter. InterNations Expat Insider 2025 still ranks Germany in the top third globally for quality of life and infrastructure. American retirees in Berlin report that conversations about U.S. politics happen, but they skew toward concern and sympathy, not confrontation. How are you managing healthcare costs? What is happening with your democracy? Germans are direct, but direct is not hostile. YouGov's December 2025 tracking found Americans pulling back on international travel heading into 2026, not because of cost alone, but because of perception anxiety. Germans feel that anxiety from the other direction. They still visit the US, but Pew's data shows interest in America as a destination has dropped sharply, with German respondents among the most negative in Europe on current US foreign policy. That is the figure often referenced in cautionary lists about Germany, and from a political standpoint, their concerns are valid. What they miss is the retiree-specific layer. Germany hosts over 120,000 Americans, military legacy, corporate assignments, and a growing retiree contingent in the Rhine Valley and Bavaria. InterNations Expat Insider 2025 scores Germany 8th globally for travel and transportation infrastructure and top 10 for working abroad. Metrics that translate directly to retiree quality of life if you can navigate the system. American retirees in Munich report that anti-US political sentiment surfaces in newspaper editorials and Bundestag debates, not at the Wirtshaus, where they're learning to order Weissbier. The catch is real, and it's not attitude, it's arithmetic. Germany has no dedicated retirement visa for Americans. You're on a Schengen tourist stay of 90 days in 180, or navigating complex residence permits tied to income, insurance, and integration requirements. Berlin rent for a furnished one-bedroom in a safe neighborhood runs $1,200 to $1,800 a month. You need comprehensive private health insurance. Budget $300 to $500 monthly minimum. And German bureaucracy will test your patience in a language that doesn't forgive mistakes. The Aufenthaltstitel residence permit process requires proof of adequate pension or savings, typically €1,200 to €1,500 monthly, plus German health insurance, an Anmeldung registration at your local Bürgeramt, and blocked account-style proof of financial stability. Most American retirees without German family ties or EU ancestry cannot simply move to Germany the way they can move to Panama. The verdict: Germany is politically the most anti-American environment on this list, but personally, you'll more likely get a sympathetic ear than a cold shoulder. It's a terrible fit for retirees who need a simple visa path, not a terrible fit because locals hate you. But if you think Canada, America's neighbor, must be safer emotionally, number 6 will wreck that assumption. Canada feels like the obvious escape for nervous American retirees. Same continent, no language barrier, familiar systems. Except Pew's 2025 G7 survey identified Canada as recording the largest decrease in favorability toward the United States among G7 members. Trade disputes, tariff rhetoric, and sovereignty tensions have moved from diplomatic back channels to dinner table conversation. Roughly a third of Canadians now hold positive views of the US, down dramatically from prior years. Political score, brutal. Number 6 overall. And that's being generous on the personal side. Here's what the surprise looks like on the ground. Canadian politeness is a cultural institution, and American retirees in Victoria, Halifax, and smaller Ontario towns report cordial, if occasionally awkward, social interactions. The conversations aren't angry, they're careful. Many Canadians express something closer to pity than rage, genuine concern about what Americans are going through with healthcare costs, political polarization, and gun violence. You're not getting yelled at. You're getting, "I'm so sorry, that must be difficult." HuffPost field reporting from March 2026 captured the emotional texture Americans are carrying. U.S. tourists worried about being labeled ugly Americans, while Europeans in the same piece describe feeling sorry for ordinary Americans rather than angry at them. Canada amplifies that dynamic because the cultural overlap is so deep. Canadians watch the same news. They have family in Buffalo and Seattle. The political rupture feels personal on both sides, but the personal layer, when you meet a Canadian retiree neighbor in Victoria, is more often mutual commiseration about healthcare costs and housing than a lecture about foreign policy. YouGov's data on declining cross-border travel interest runs both ways. Fewer Americans planning Canadian vacations, and Canadian media running stories about whether U.S. travel is safe amid ICE enforcement headlines. The bilateral mood is sour. But sour is not the same as hostile when you're at the Saturday Farmers Market in Halifax. The catch? Canada is not a budget retirement play. Vancouver and Toronto are more expensive than most U.S. cities. Even Victoria requires $3,200 to $4,500 a month for a modest life. Immigration pathways for American retirees are limited. There's no retirement visa. The super visa lets parents and grandparents visit for extended stays but doesn't grant residency. Permanent immigration requires points-based systems most retirees cannot clear. The provincial nominee programs target working-age skilled workers, not fixed-income retirees. An American who sells everything in Arizona and drives to Victoria is a tourist at the border. 6 months maximum per year, unless you secure a status that most retirees simply don't qualify for. The verdict: Canada offers emotional familiarity and genuine personal decency. But politically, the U.S.Canada relationship is in its worst public opinion territory in decades, and there's no retirement visa to make the move stick. If you want Western Europe with better personal warmth than the data suggests, we need to talk about number 5. France has a decades-long reputation for political skepticism toward U.S. foreign policy, and 2025-2026 didn't soften that. Pew's global surveys show majorities in France holding negative views of current U.S. leadership and policy direction. French media coverage of American politics ranges from critical to openly dismissive. If you rank countries by political anti-Americanism alone, France competes with Germany for the bottom. French protest culture is vocal and visible, but it's aimed at policy, at systems, at governments. Not at the 68-year-old from Ohio who moved to Lyon to stretch a pension. The surprise? French personal culture toward individual Americans is far warmer than the political score implies. American retirees in Lyon, Toulouse, and smaller Provence towns consistently report being welcomed into local routines. Market vendors remembering your order, neighbors inviting you to apéro. Conversations that start with curiosity about American life rather than lectures about geopolitics. Rick Steves' 2025 field reporting and multiple expat surveys confirm the pattern. Europeans distinguish between American government actions and American people sitting at their table. The UpgradedPoints.com 2025 survey of 3,000 Europeans on American tourists found a spectrum. Stereotypes about loud Americans persist, but personal encounters overwhelmingly soften those views. France is the country where that gap between stereotype and reality is widest. A retiree in Toulouse who joins the local Bulls game is not the tourist who blocks a cathedral entrance with a selfie stick. French people notice the difference. they reward it with invitations to dinner. And the sympathy response is distinctly French in its expression. Not gushing, not performative, but a raised eyebrow and a quiet, c'est difficile, la situation chez vous, that translates to genuine concern. American retirees in France report that this reaction increased in 2025 and 2026, not decreased. Political criticism of U.S. leadership rose. Personal warmth toward American neighbors held steady or improved. The catch: France has no simple retirement visa. The long-stay visitor visa requires proof of substantial passive income, typically $2,000 to $2,500 monthly, plus significant savings, and mandatory private health insurance. French bureaucracy is legendary. Property in desirable Provence has repriced sharply, and you'll need functional French within your first year or daily life becomes an exercise in frustration. The verdict? France ranks low on political warmth and middling on personal welcome, but the gap between those two scores is enormous. You'll eat better here than almost anywhere on Earth. Just don't confuse gastronomy with immigration simplicity. Before we hit the midpoint, if you're actually building a short list of where to retire, not just where the headlines scare you, Retire Finder lets you compare countries side by side on visa thresholds, healthcare access, and real monthly costs with 2026 data. Link in the description. You can filter by political climate versus personal welcome scores, the exact distinction this video is built on, and see which countries pass both tests. Back to the ranking. But if anti-tourism anger is what keeps you up at night, number 4 is the one Americans are getting wrong right now. Spain has become ground zero for two separate fears American retirees carry in 2026: political skepticism toward U.S. policy across Western Europe, and localized anti-tourism protests in Barcelona, Mallorca, and parts of the Canary Islands. ABC News reported renewed anti-tourism demonstrations across Europe in early 2026, with Spain among the most visible flashpoints. Water guns aimed at tourists, tourists go home graffiti, housing affordability anger. It's real and it's on camera. Political anti-Americanism, moderate to high by Pew's European benchmarks. Anti-over-tourism sentiment, high in Barcelona and Ibiza, moderate elsewhere. That's why Spain lands at number 4. The hostility exists, but it's aimed at a category, not at you specifically. Here's the surprise. American retirees who settle in Valencia, Málaga, or Tenerife, not tourist districts, report a completely different experience. Spaniards in residential neighborhoods distinguish between the drunk tourist who rents an Airbnb for a weekend and the retiree who shops at Mercadona, learns Spanish, and joins the local peña. Personal welcome scores from American expats in these cities run significantly higher than Barcelona horror stories suggest. And the sympathy angle shows up here too. Many Spaniards express concern about American healthcare and retirement insecurity with genuine warmth. USA Today's May 2025 reporting on Americans traveling abroad captured the phrase that keeps appearing in expat forums: "I didn't vote for him." American retirees in Spain say they rarely need to say it. Spaniards in residential neighborhoods already separate people from policy. What has increased is the frequency of Spaniards asking about American healthcare costs, genuine shock at insulin prices, at $5,000 deductibles, at retirees working part-time to cover Medicare gaps. That conversation is sympathy, not hostility. The anti-tourism protests are real, and they are specifically targeted at short-term rental platforms, at cruise ship crowds, at behavior that prices locals out of their own neighborhoods. An American retiree who rents long-term, shops at Mercadona, and speaks basic Spanish is categorically not the target. Expat forums in Valencia and the Canary Islands are clear on this distinction in a way that headline coverage is not. The catch? Spain's golden visa died on April 3, 2025. Organic Law 1/2025 closed that door permanently. Your realistic paths are the non-lucrative visa at roughly €2,400 a month in passive income, or the digital nomad visa if you have remote income. IMA-style bureaucracy doesn't exist in Spain, but consulate processing varies wildly by US city. And if you pick Barcelona or Madrid center, you'll pay tourist economy prices and absorb tourist economy resentment. The verdict: Spain is politically and culturally complicated in 2026, but retiree-friendly cities still welcome Americans who behave like residents, not invaders. If you want Latin America where the political relationship with Washington is tense, but the cafe table is warm, number 3 delivers exactly that paradox. Mexico has over 1.6 million US residents and the largest American expat population of any country on Earth. You'd think that means universal welcome. The political reality is messier. Pew's 2025 global data shows majorities in Mexico holding negative views of US foreign policy direction. Tariff threats, border politics, and historical grievances keep the government-to-government relationship strained. Mexican media covers US politics extensively and critically. Political score: moderate to high tension. Personal score: this is where the ranking methodology pays off. American retirees in Mérida, Lake Chapala, and San Miguel report overwhelmingly positive personal treatment. Mexicans are culturally hospitable to a degree that shocks first-time visitors. The sympathy response is constant. ¿Cómo está la situación allá? Must be hard with the costs. You're not defending US foreign policy at the tortilleria. You're being offered another tamal. InterNations data consistently places Mexico in the top tier for ease of settling in and finding community. The personal welcome data for Mexico is the strongest counterargument to the political data. InterNations Expat Insider 2025 places Mexico in the top 5 globally for ease of finding friends and feeling at home. Metrics driven overwhelmingly by American and Canadian respondents. Over 1.6 million US citizens live in Mexico. That's not a population that stays where they're hated. The Lake Chapala area alone hosts one of the largest concentrations of American retirees outside the United States, and the community has been growing, not shrinking, through 2025 and 2026. When Mexicans ask about American life, the tone is familial. ¿Tu familia está bien? ¿La situación es muy mala ahora? These are neighbor questions, not interrogations. The sympathy Americans receive in Mexico is among the most openly expressed on this list. Because Mexican culture treats hospitality as a default, and because many Mexicans have relatives in the US who are navigating the same healthcare and cost of living crisis you are. That personal warmth is exactly why the visa repricing hurts so much. Mexico wants you here culturally and economically, but the consulate math now excludes the average Social Security retiree unless they have supplemental income from investments, rental property, or a part-time pension. The catch is brutal, and it's not attitude. It's the visa math that changed. Mexico's temporary residency income requirement jumped from roughly $1,400 a month to approximately $4,400 a month in 2025 to 2026, tied to Mexico's daily minimum wage multiplier. If you planned your move using 2024 articles, you're working off dead numbers. The average Social Security check is $1,900. That gap is $2,500 a month you don't have. Crime varies enormously by state. Mérida is not Tijuana. Healthcare in major cities is excellent and affordable, but rural coverage thins fast. And you still file U.S. taxes. The verdict. Mexico is the proof that political anti-Americanism and personal welcome can coexist, but the visa door just got significantly harder to open. If you want European infrastructure with genuinely high personal welcome scores, number 2 is the one the data keeps confirming. Portugal barely registers on political anti-Americanism charts compared to Germany, France, or Canada. Portuguese public opinion toward Americans is broadly neutral to positive, and the country has actively courted foreign residents for a decade. InterNations Expat Insider 2025 ranks Portugal consistently high for quality of life, ease of settling in, and finding friends. Over 20,000 Americans already live here. The surprise isn't that Portugal is welcoming, everyone knows that. The surprise is how Portuguese people engage with American retirees politically. It's not debate, it's empathy. Conversations in Porto's cafes and Algarve markets frequently turn to how Americans manage healthcare, prescription costs, and political stress, delivered with genuine concern, not condescension. You are more likely to hear, "I feel sorry for what you deal with," than "Your government is terrible." Portugal's personal welcome score is where this country separates from every Northern European entry on this list. InterNations respondents in Portugal consistently rate the local population as among the most welcoming in Europe for foreigners, not just tolerant, but actively friendly. The Portuguese have decades of experience with foreign retirees, particularly British and American, and the cultural muscle memory of hospitality is deep. The Portuguese diaspora in the U.S., over 1.4 million Americans of Portuguese descent, creates a bridge most retirees don't expect. Mention your grandmother from the Azores and watch the conversation change. Portuguese people understand migration, understand economic pressure, understand leaving home for opportunity. That cultural memory feeds directly into how they receive American retirees in 2026. American retirees in the Algarve describe a social environment where their nationality is a conversation starter, not a conversation stopper. Portuguese neighbors share concerns about American politics the way you'd share concerns about a friend's difficult family situation, with empathy, not accusation. The phrase American retirees report hearing most often is some version of, "It must be hard right now," and they mean it. Healthcare access through Portugal's SNS system after residency registration is affordable by US standards. A GP visit runs €5 to €10 with SNS coverage. Private insurance for expats costs $100 to $200 monthly. English is widely spoken in Porto and the Algarve, less so in the interior. The catch: the welcome mat is out, but the tax door changed. Portugal's original NHR regime closed to new applicants in January 2024, and the replacement IFICI regime does not cover retirees or passive pension income. You're on progressive rates up to 48%. The D7 visa still works at roughly €920 per month passive income as of January 2026, but IMA processing time stretched 6 to 12 months. Lisbon and Cascais are priced for people who already have money. Porto and the Algarve remain viable, but run the tax math with a cross-border accountant before you sell your house. The verdict: Portugal is the European sweet spot for personal welcome, political neutrality, plus genuine human warmth, if you accept the post-NHR tax reality. But the number one country on this list isn't in Europe. And the reason it tops the ranking will change how you think about every "Americans aren't welcome abroad" headline you've read this year. Here is the counterintuitive finding that no viral list has captured. The single most common reaction American retirees report from locals abroad in 2026 is not hostility, it's a combination of sympathy and sincere interest in how ordinary Americans are coping. Healthcare anxiety, political exhaustion, the cost of living crisis. Locals who have watched Hollywood their entire lives meet real Americans and often feel sorry for us rather than angry at us. And no country on this list delivers that response more consistently, more warmly, and more actionably than Panama. Political anti-Americanism in Panama, low. The bilateral relationship is pragmatic. Canal economics, dollarized currency, decades of U.S. cultural influence. Panamanians don't organize anti-American protests. They organize fishing tournaments and coffee festivals. Personal welcome, the highest on this list. Panama's pensionado visa requires just $1,000 in monthly lifetime pension income. The average Social Security check is $1,900. Permanent residency from day one. 50% off entertainment, 25% off domestic flights. Import duty exemptions on household goods. Boquete alone has roughly 3,500 expats in a town of 20,000, and the integration is genuine, not gated community isolation. The sympathy factor runs deep here. Panamanians understand economic vulnerability in ways many Europeans theorize about. When you explain your Social Security check and your Medicare gaps, the response isn't political judgment, it's, "Let me introduce you to my neighbor who found a great doctor in David," or "You should try this pensioner discount at the restaurant." The data case for Panama as number one is structural, not sentimental. InterNations Expat Insider 2025 ranks Panama in the top 10 globally for personal finance satisfaction among expats, driven by low cost of living relative to quality, accessible healthcare in Panama City, and the pensionado discount system that no other country on this list matches in statutory breadth. The average monthly budget for a retiree in Boquete runs $1,300 to $1,800, against $4,800 needed for a modest U.S. retirement. Healthcare in Panama City meets international standards at Hospital Punta Pacifica and Hospital Nacional. A specialist visit runs $40 to $80 without insurance. Many retirees carry a $100 to $150 monthly private policy and pay out of pocket for routine care. Outside the capital, David in Cherokee Province serves the Boquete corridor with adequate clinics, but serious cases route to Panama City. The sympathy factor has a practical dimension beyond emotion. Panamanians who help American retirees navigate the system, finding a doctor, explaining the pensionado discount, introducing you to a reliable contractor, do so because the relationship is reciprocal. You're a neighbor, spending money in their economy, learning their language, respecting their country. The welcome isn't performative, it's earned and returned. Global Rescue's 72% anxiety statistic measures fear, not experience. The Americans who actually moved report a reality that headlines don't capture, and Panama is where that gap between fear and experience is widest. Over 25,000 Americans live in Panama as legal residents. The community is growing, not contracting. Facebook groups for Panama retirees add hundreds of members monthly. The people who made the move are not reporting hostility. They're reporting relief. Relief that their pension stretches. Relief that their neighbors are kind. Relief that the political headlines they feared didn't follow them to the grocery store. The catch: Panama is not perfect. Spanish dominates outside expat bubbles. A licensed Panamanian immigration lawyer is mandatory. Budget $3,000 to $6,000 all in. Public healthcare outside Panama City is uneven, and the pensionado program's legal discounts require you to actually obtain and carry your pensionado carnet. Bureaucracy matters. Weather on the Pacific coast is hot and humid. Boquete is cooler but rainier than marketing photos suggest. The verdict? Panama is number one because it scores lowest on political anti-Americanism and highest on personal welcome, and because the sympathy Americans receive here isn't a consolation prize. It's the actual emotional reality of retirement abroad in 2026, hiding behind headlines you'll never see in a Pew chart. One more thing before we wrap. If you're serious about making this move, Retire Finder helps you build a data-backed shortlist, visa thresholds, healthcare systems, monthly budgets, filtered for 2026, not 2023 blog posts. Link below. You can compare Panama's $1,000 threshold against Portugal's €920 D7 and see the full cost of living pictures side by side. The tool exists because the spreadsheet most retirees are using is already wrong. 7 countries, 1 thesis, Germany, political ice, personal warmth underneath, Canada, neighborly pity, no visa path, France, critical media, welcoming tables, Spain, protest headlines, resident reality, Mexico, strained politics, open arms, Portugal, European empathy capital, Panama, where sympathy meets the most accessible retirement door in the Western Hemisphere. The Global Rescue 72% figure measures anxiety before the trip, not experience after the move. The Pew data measures how foreigners feel about your government, not how your neighbor feels about you. Every list ranking where Americans are unwelcome measured the wrong variable. Political sentiment is real. Personal hostility toward you, the retiree buying groceries, learning the language, paying local rent, is mostly not. The Americans suffering abroad aren't getting yelled at, they're getting asked if they're okay. The Americans who never left are making decisions based on headlines that were never about them. That distinction is worth more than any visa discount, any tax break, any cost of living spreadsheet, because if you're too afraid to go, the best retirement math in the world is irrelevant. Knowing which countries welcome you is only half the decision. The other half is whether you can afford the visa threshold to actually get through the door. And that's exactly what we're breaking down in our next video on the retirement visa rankings every publication still gets wrong. The welcome mat means nothing if the door is locked. Now you know both. And if you've been carrying anxiety about being the ugly American, the data says you're more likely to be the American someone feels sorry for. That's not an insult. That's the emotional reality of 2026. Use it to make a clear-eyed decision, not a fear-based one. The countries on this list that rank highest for personal welcome are not hiding from the news. They're watching it with you, and then asking if you want another coffee.